Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of Love Learning You. I'm so excited today because we are going to get into how did we get into this tagline for this podcast called Let's Get Compassionately Curious Together. So if you've listened for a while, welcome back. If you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe or follow. We're at Love Learning You on social channels. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, etc., all the platforms, Audible. But let's get into it right away. So we're sponsored by educatoraid.com. Again, you might hear me say that at the end of every podcast. Let's get compassionately curious together. And today's book vlog, a special episode, we are going to dive into this text by Warren Berger. And these episodes are usually around 7 or 8 minutes. I've gone live and done a couple on the YouTube channel at Love Learning You, same as our podcast name, but I've done a couple live and I wanted to do an actual podcast episode version. The book, A More Beautiful Question, and a background on me very briefly. I was a teacher and principal by trade. I still work with K-12 schools and I love it. I wanted to be a teacher since I was 8 years old, and I've always been very curious. I love to ask questions, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. It got me in trouble as a kid. It's gotten me in trouble as an adult. And when I say trouble, I mean that to ask the right questions and to also be the person who asks questions can actually be very scary. And it, in my opinion, can take bravery. And then to ask the right questions, I think we have to have this sprinkling of compassion along with some other things. So we want to get into it. And I just want to introduce this text as a platform because when I did teach, one of the cool activities, so no matter who you are, but especially if you're a parent or you work with students or children in that type of setting, I think the types of questions we ask really matter. And especially, and let me not even say that, networking, professional events. One of my pet peeves is honestly going to events and having to shoot the breeze, so to speak, or just talk about the weather, quote unquote, with people that you meet for the first time. And I've been that way since I was a kid. I'm very observant. I notice details and patterns very easily. And I enjoy people watching and studying people. So it's no surprise to me that I've gone into the field of work I have as far as a researcher and practitioner around cultural empathy and cultural psychology, and also understanding the neuroscience behind why we ask the things we do, why we judge people the way that we do, why we all have bias from the time we're very, very young. So these are the types of things that excite me and interest me. But going back to things that you can do a little bit differently already and giving you a strategy, in the classroom, any unit or lesson I would kick off with had a question of sorts. And sometimes they're called guiding questions, sometimes essential questions. These can be two different things in the world of K-12 education. For our purposes, we're just going to say guiding question. And the questions I ask are actually intended to ignite more questions. And the reason that I did that as an educator, and I still do that with adults that I facilitate, even PhD level adults, is I want to understand as a facilitator and teacher of learning, where are the different competency levels as well as lived experiences and where the mind's at of the participants in that moment. So one question I might have asked when I taught fourth grade science specifically would have been, um, what do we want to understand about the growth patterns of a tomato plant? Okay, say that we're going to be starting a unit on tomatoes, and the specific lesson for that day was about dissecting the seeds from a tomato fruit. That was a real lesson that I used to teach. So if that was the lesson, and then we're going to be charting those responses, of course, you can embed math standards, you can do writing standards if you use science journals and notebooks, which I love. I'm actually coming out with some soon, so stay tuned. If you're an educator or parent of a student who just loves to be outdoors. However, that question would then, I would have students just write it on a Post-it. We would post them all on the board. And then we would try to see, do we answer all these questions throughout our unit of study. And it was really cool because kids could also feel like they were co-leading and co-teaching and offering their knowledge and expertise. And this is something I've seen a lot, whether it's in Montessori programs, international baccalaureate programs, as well as public schools, private schools, charter schools. I've seen it across the board. And so one thing about asking brilliant questions is that no matter your space as a professional, no matter the setting you're in, they all help us gain understanding, whether it's about ourselves or others. And that is why I like questions. So I do realize, though, that that is not how everyone is wired. And that can be quite scary. So let me give you one more story and then also a little bit of background. So one of our tagline here at the podcast, every episode at the end, I say, let's continue to get compassionately curious together. And the reason that I chose the word compassion is because it holds this kind of deeper meaning. And I do see a lot in the world right now where, and it's been happening really the past couple of decades, where there's more mental health acceptance and awareness. There are much more supports, whether it's in the workplace or schools, for differently abled, mental health needs, etc. So the world is broadening, our views are broadening. However, that doesn't mean that it's everyone's understanding or experience. A prime example is the current political climate in the United States. And we have two different candidates on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as beliefs, policies, et cetera, in a lot of ways. Some ways no, and we're not going to get into what the American political system is today. That's not this episode. However, one of the things I'm already seeing happen, obviously, is the rampant reactions and hate that is spread around on social media platforms. And I think it's approximately 70% of written language is misinterpreted, and it's misinterpreted with a negative bent. And so not only are we often misreading what people intended to say, we're receiving it in a lean of it's filtered through probably our worst perspective of what they could have meant. So call it the human brain and how it categorizes, call it whatever space we happen to be in that day, and these media platforms, how the algorithms can kind of bombard us. And if it's not bombarding you, then it's also given me pause to go, well, why is everything looking the same, or why is it all the same lens? So it's really important in this day and age that we do ask questions. And so a little bit of background on the word compassion. It actually comes from a Latin root, and it shares the same meaning of the root of the word sympathy. So often you'll see, even if you look in the dictionary, synonym for compassion is sympathy. And sympathy often can mean feeling sorry for someone, or feeling bad for someone, feeling pity for someone. In this situation, because the Latin roots cum and sim, they both mean with. And so that's where you see some intersectionality with people saying, well, compassion is a little bit like sympathy, but not quite the same thing. So let's break it down further. If you go deeper into those beyond the cum, C-O-M, the Latin root, you get into compassio. And compassio, it comes from the Latin meaning fellow feeling. We could really unpack that. And then we also have compatir, and to suffer with. So I'll give a prime example. This is a social media example. It actually just happened this morning before I'm recording this. And I put out different content across my platforms, depending on what I'm working on, what programs I have going, et cetera. And I came across this post, and one of the commenters decided to say, well, I think that on LinkedIn, this was the platform I was on, I think on LinkedIn, any type of religious post should be banned. Nobody cares, and I don't care. This was the person's statement. And I saw the comment. It didn't cause any type of, ooh, that makes me so mad. Ooh, I can't believe they'd say that. Nothing like that. But I'll tell you my exact thought process. I literally went, I wonder what's happened in his story or his life to make him say that. And I really did wonder that, because that isn't my experience. I don't feel that way, whether I see people who are Muslim, Jewish, atheist, Christian, etc. If it's a belief post, I don't have to do anything with it. I don't, and if I really don't like it, I can just say, I don't want to see this in my feed anymore. So it was interesting that he took the time to say that. So my question that I then posed, knowing that written language can be misconstrued, this is a person I don't know, I've never met. It's a social media platform. There's a bunch of other comments and perspectives already flying around. And I said, interesting perspective. If you don't care, why do you think there should be a ban? So for me, I really do want to know, because I know ultimately from a psychology perspective, if we care, we often do get worked up and we have reaction, or maybe we don't, some people really thrive, or they think they thrive off of negative energy. And to have that type of energy, it can serve a purpose. And it brings me back to actually ask a question, which is, what purpose does that serve for you? So any reaction you have, you don't even have to label them good or bad, but any reaction you have, you can ask yourself this question: what purpose is this reaction serving me right now? And what is it telling me? What is it telling me underneath? So there's some things I might read sometimes even online, and I feel like, go, what? I can't believe this person would post that. I'm sure many of us can relate. Um, so just understand, first and foremost, how about we try to have grace, especially when we're reading the written word online, and many of these platforms, which are global. It's over almost 9 billion people on the planet. And we all see the world through a very different perspective, meaning our lived experiences, our cultural context, our personality makeup, the time and space we were born. And many of us also struggle at times in our lives, whether it's because of work or family, or grief or suffering, depression, anxiety, these different things that might plague any one of us at any time, sometimes bigger things than others. Addictions, heartache, heartbreak. These aren't things that are different for any human in our experiences. We all experience suffering. And so for me, compassion is about, can I try to understand your suffering, or I'm looking back at these Latin root words that I have written down as my notes, because can I actually try to be with my fellow human and have some type of feeling, or at least try to understand what they're feeling? And it doesn't mean that you're going to be at the same frequency. It doesn't mean that you're going to be matching the same energy, nothing like that. But all that a question does is it helps open the door to go deeper. When it's a yes, no question, and it's not perhaps the right question, and it's just, what's your name? What's your job? That doesn't really tell me much about who that person is. It tells me about what they do and happen to have as their title for a job. That might not even reflect their skill set or their spiritual gifts and talents. It really tells me nothing about their cultural context, personality. So when we think about questions, whether it's in an online media forum, whether it is in a class you're in, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your home, whether it's in relationships, personal and professional, the questions we ask are important. Now, I also know there's generational differences between how we ask questions. And I would encourage all of us, regardless of our age, regardless of our backgrounds, even if you're in situations, and I want to leave us with this quote actually from the book. Once again, this is just a book vlog, meaning me talking about and introducing you to a book. And then I'm going to close out with letting y'all know that down below, you can hop in right now, grab my free Audible list of over 35 title recommendations, and then check out our new program, Purposeful Pages, see if it's for you. So going back to my notes, the question that we had in this text, and how I want to bring this all together too, is your ego healthy enough to be the only questioner in the room? And part of this goes back to courage. Part of it goes back to bravery and how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we see others, the spaces that we find ourselves in. And I'm going to read it one more time, even if I'm not wired the same as someone else. And I'm like, I don't feel anything about that. Why would I feel something about that? ask yourself this question and go back to it. If you're in a room, even with 5 other people or 500 other people, no matter, if you're not clear on something or you're sitting there in your head judging, which I've done and I do because I'm human and we all are. It's okay. Don't stay stuck and beat yourself up. Identify it and move on. But if we sit there and go, oh, well, what do they mean by that? Well, we can ask. Is your ego healthy enough? Doesn't say that your ego needs to die. Note that. That's important. To be the only questioner in the room. I often joke with people that I am often hired. It's not even a joke. Let me not say that. I am often hired to be a disruptor in organizations and ask the questions that other people don't want to ask. This is what I mean, to go full circle to where I started of it's gotten me in trouble. As a kid, it was truly curiosity. It's why I love being outside in nature, because I could just endlessly explore. And it was like I was discovering and asking questions at the same time. Then I'd go check out books at the library about those same things that I was outside doing. So this is something that I've been kind of returning to, even as practices, because those things were missing when I became a school principal. I became much more of a workaholic. I already was as a teacher from the time I was 20 years old. And I think it's important to pause and ask a question. Even if you ponder on that one, there's some questions like that one. I'll probably be journaling about that the next couple months. And I'll be exploring for myself, just to model for you all, what are those questions and in what spaces that I would still question if my ego is healthy enough to be the only questioner in the room. So I'm going to be going deeper with that, but I wanted to do these book vlogs, and I wanted to bring this over to the podcast, actually, not just do the YouTube live versions. I have 2 other ones on the Educator Aid YouTube right now if you want to check those first ones out. But let me share my screen very fast here. And then you can also look at the show notes. There we go. Okay. Give me one moment, you all. I thought I had this pulled up for you. I do. Okay, so if you click on the link below, you can also visit bit.ly, bit.ly, and then / join book circle, join book circle. And this is where you can pick up my free Audible list. You can learn a little bit more about me and my background. Who is this lady talking with her plants in the background? And then choose if it's an opportunity for you. So the only thing that I do want to point out is just what to keystone texts is what I'm calling them, or spotlight texts. They are going to guide the work that we do together. This program is, number one, I created it for my own accountability. I'm going to be honest. I wanted to reread 2 texts that I've read completely multiple times, the 4 Agreements. So this particular Purposeful Pages book circle is called the 4 Agreements book circle. And then our other supporting text will be The Untethered Soul. The Untethered Soul I've hopped around in. I haven't read it cover to cover, and that's my honest truth. I wanted to share this, though, because you can find the complete syllabus, and then it is a very self-paced program. Every session will be released the second Sunday of the month, and the suggested journey is across the 6 months. I'll have different assignments embedded. This is not the deep dive resource that if you enroll, you'll receive a lot more things. This is kind of a broad level syllabus overview of the objectives, but this also details the different tools we're going to work with. I wanted to address a couple questions that I've already received about this. And once again, you can visit educatoraid.com to find this, or click the link below. But one question I did get, and I want to address, is, and a lot of this is about belief systems. We don't need to be afraid to talk about our own beliefs, because we all have different ones, just like I just broke down about the almost 9 billion people on the earth. I got an interesting question, and I had a person ask about the 4 Agreements from a different religious background who didn't have a large understanding of Toltec traditions and wisdom. I don't either, and I'm not an expert, and those aren't my tribal lineages. Toltec wisdom and those tribal lineages are based in Mexico, which is modern day Mexico, of that region of North America. I want to point this out because she asked some questions that were really powerful and gave me a lot of thinking to do. And this person had mentioned that, I don't know what I think about that personally with my own beliefs type thing. And that's common. And that is something I ask myself actually since I was a kid with reading books. And then I will also say it's like any decision. So we need to consider what we consume and why we're consuming it. If you already know your belief system and you're very firm in certain beliefs, and there are certain gateways that if you open them, you don't want to attract certain things into your life because of your own convictions and your own belief system, then that is perfect sense. And that's with anything, right? The TV shows we watch, the books we choose to read, the foods we put into our bodies, the people that we surround ourselves with. What we consume is important. So not just what we question, but what we consume, literally mind, body, soul, is so important because that becomes your thoughts. Your thoughts become your behaviors become your actions, those become your patterns, those become your habits. Bada boom, there's your life. And there's your belief system reflected in how you speak and how you write and how you interact on social media. We're back full circle. So all I would say is no matter what you're toying with, whether it's a coaching program you want to jump into with an incredible mentor, whether it's a pastor's new series, or maybe you follow a rabbi and they're going to do a small group session on part of the Torah, whatever that thing is that you're toying with, regardless of your background, regardless of what religious beliefs you claim, whether you're atheist, agnostic, my only advice, no matter what it is you're going to decide to consume, especially if you're making a monetary investment in yourself, is number one, to sit with it and ask yourself questions as to why you're doing it. What's your goal? What's your intention? Secondly, think about if it will expand your faith journey, not only in yourself, but ultimately in whatever your belief system is. So if you find faith in fill in the blank, then that would be your lens by which you would journey. So a lot of this is actually about also setting up, you saw one of the tools that's proprietary to Educator Aid, which is the personal and professional vision roadmap. And we're going to be just doing some stuff aligned with career and purpose, but it's also personal too. To me, they aren't separate. I'm a kind of like a comprehensive, holistic person. I've always been that way. It's not like, oh, you only teach third grade or fourth grade. No, and I also do this for the district, and I also am on this committee. I'm just that way. You don't have to be. We're all wired differently. But that's why I say the best thing we can do is to love learning ourselves and not become consumed or obsessed with trying to project what we believe or what we think. That might sound really rich, not only just coming from me who asks a lot of questions and thinks about a lot of deep things, but just anybody in this day and age. That might sound really rich because there are so many distractions. And that is why this work is difficult. So if you find it difficult to commit time to even reading a book, that's literally why I created this. So a lot of this is accountability because I want to go in deeper into these texts, and it holds me accountable as a practitioner. And I know there are so many distractions. So this has gotten a little lengthy, but I had some things to say. I had some questions to ask. So I will leave you with how we usually sign off. Drop any comments, questions below. Excuse me, send us a voice memo if you happen to listen on podcasts. I think you can do that on Spotify. And then this was the text that we jumped into in this book vlog. All right, take care, and let's continue to get compassionately curious together.